Like, share, subscribe to Live for Love TV.
Hello, everybody. My name is Caleb, and you're watching Live for Love TV. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Welcome back to Live for Love TV. Today's the 5th day, the 11th month of the 22nd year inside the 21st century. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Ever since there was man, and ever since there was communities of men and women, there's always been ruling classes in every community. There's always people who make the decisions for the rest of the community. There's always some sort of hierarchy. Now, as the years go on in any community, the hierarchy are normally placed there by their families. Therefore, if they were in the hierarchy before and they have a lot of money, they get the privileged positions, and then they apparently know more than the regular people, so they then get the positions that come up. So this happened with kings, happens currently with governments around the world, doesn't matter where it is. You look, they go to the best schools, they're groomed from their young to become leaders, unlike the common man. Now, the problem is with this is that people often say that these people don't understand the problems of the common man. But how could they? They've probably not come from that. They've probably never had a shortage. They've probably never had, debts that they can't afford, and schools they can't afford to go to, and clothes that they can't afford clothes and stuff. So they've never been in that position. And this is not to say Western governments. This is governments usually right across the world and right across the planet. But then you could make an everyday person who's been probably living on a council flat or in the projects in America or anywhere like that, you could make them the leader, but would they be able to rule over all of its people? Now, some will say, well, the people who are ruling right now are not doing a very good job. And that's a fair argument. I accept that. They're not doing a very good job, and they don't seem to understand the majority. But the problem is always going to be the level of education. If people come from the lower ebbs of society, usually they've struggled so much just to keep food on their plate, they haven't had time to educate themselves to the wider world. That's normally the case. It's not always the case. It's normally the case. And so people wouldn't really want them to be ruling or to be in charge. So people kind of accept this sort of hierarchy of people, whether they were the Raj in India, the royal family across Europe, the kings and queens across Africa, were always, as I said, coming from the elite families who thought that their children and their families knew more than the everyday person who was, down by the river and washing clothes. They didn't see those people could rule. So people were almost born to rule. If you look back, you see it with almost all communities throughout life. So how do we get over this problem? Because right now we have a cost of a living crisis. And you hear the politicians, they say all the right things, but the problem is none of them have ever been in a cost of living crisis. None of them ever had struggles that probably the people who are in the cost of living crisis now are having. They've probably never been there. They just can't feel that feeling of not having enough electricity, or having to, to budget the electricity, or budget how much they have to spend on the family's groceries. Never had that in their entire lives. And therefore, when they say they're going to do something about the cost of living crisis, there's an old saying, who feels it knows it. If they're not feeling it, then they probably don't know it. And I'm not blaming them, because it's just the life that they have. Many people are in the same situation. When you're in a poor or a lower class, lower ebbs part of the society, only those problems. You don't know the big, massive problems of fiscal policies and how to run massive amounts of people, 300,000, millions, 10 million, 50. How do you operate at that level when you've never done it? This was a conundrum that you can remember happened in South Africa in 1994, when people say Nelson Mandela sold out to the Europeans and left them with the economic power. He wasn't as silly as some people say. I disagree with a lot of people to say that he sold out, because he recognized that these people had a stranglehold economically in the country, and they had a stranglehold across the world. They did the deals with other countries, and that's why South Africa is still in the position today where it's still recognizable financially, even though the majority of the people are below the lines, the levels that they should be. It still has some level of finances that are pretty different than most of the African continent. He would have had a conundrum to make. He could have taken the power away. There's a majority of people are black. He could have taken all the power away and given it to his own people. But what would have happened? We saw in Zimbabwe how the rest of the world turned on Zimbabwe and made Zimbabwe, one of the poorest places in Africa and a struggling place, a place that was known as a breadbasket before when it was called Rhodesia. Though I think that title's a bit disgusting, because when they say breadbasket for the Europeans, it wasn't a breadbasket for black people in Rhodesia or Zimbabwe. But just making the point that we have to be careful when we say we want who we want to rule over us, and we can't just make the statement that we need to rule over ourselves. The problem with this argument is that if we could rule over ourselves, we would be ruling over ourselves. Isn't that right? Why are we not ruling over ourselves now? We're the majority. We don't have to vote for anybody. We can just come together, even 10 of us on the block, or 15, 20, 50, 100 people on the block, and rule over ourselves. We can pool our resources, pool our economics, pool our education levels, pool our system together. We can do it right now, but we're not doing it. Why? Why is it not being done? Why are people waiting for somebody to say that they're in power, that they can then do that? This is another part of the conundrum that people have to answer. And a lot of these people that they like to pull down other people and say that they're not doing right by the community, they have to understand that things are not black and white mostly. They're mostly in the grey area, because there is a lot of people trying to stop people like me and you from getting into power. But it's also me and you that's trying to stop me and you from getting into power. Instead of working together, you come together with a man and woman or your community. You need to pool your economic resources, and you need to be able to trust one another. You need to be honest with one another. You can't have all this, you're sending money to people in your family to a different country to build houses, and they're running off with the money and the houses are not being built. This is happening constantly across many parts of the world. And then this is what leads to the mistrust and the fact that people have to then go back running cap in hand to the very people they believe are their enemies, because at least they say they're paying you on the 15th of the month. They pay you on the 15th of the month. It may be a pittance to what you deserve, but you're going to get paid on that day. So we have big problems when it comes to who's going to rule over us. Massive problems. We have big problems when it comes to the way we rule over ourselves. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, we don't want people coming out and just pointing the finger at the enemy and not telling us how we get this thing done. How do we get this? I always hear about all the economic power that the black Americans have in America, and how much money they have, and they're poor, but they don't bring it together. They do not bring it together. And often when you see black people in the community, people don't spend their money with those very people. They prefer to spend their money with other people. And this happens on the continent of Africa. I've seen how they operate on the continent, right, especially across West Africa. I've seen it. And I know it happens right across Africa in the black community. There is something there that needs to be dealt with before we start accusing other people of problems. So people always seem to want to know, when you're a business person in Africa or in the Caribbean, they want to know, when you're black, what you pay for the thing before they pay you for what they want. They want to know how much did you pay for it. They don't do this when they're talking about other communities, Jewish, Asian, Europeans. They just go in and spend the money. They don't argue. But when it's another black person, they want to know, Imatif, how much you might charge? Imatif, how much did he pay for it? And sometimes they'll go round your back when somebody's delivering stuff to you and ask, how much does he pay for that water? And if they say $20, they're thinking you should sell it to them for $20. You shouldn't make a profit off them, when everybody else in the world in business is in business to make a profit. Everybody isn't to make, but even the person who goes to work in order to make a profit. That's why we go to work. That's why we go into business. We need to make a profit so we can then go on to do things with that extra money once we've worked out how we're going to get that little extra cash. But this is the problem with a lot of people. But yet these things are not talked about, because it's so easy to point the finger and say, well, this is the problem. Racism is causing us all these problems. There is a problem within ourselves when it comes to rulership and being honest with one another. As I said to you already, I do not hear in the community people pooling their resources together. There are small communities and small cliques. I mean, I remember when people used to get up early in the morning, put their money together, and all go and buy their fruits and their meat and their vegetables and buy it together in a clique so they get it cheaper. That happened amongst certain groups, and it's still happening amongst certain conscious groups. But the majority of people wouldn't do this. They just don't trust one another, and they don't think like that. They do it. They want to do things individually, and this is the problem. The individual thing. When you live an individual way and an individual life, somebody who doesn't look like you is always going to come and rule over you. It's a simple maths. The 2 and 2 equals 4. It always happens. If you do things collectively, then they can't rule over you, because you will have a collective rulership. But if you do things individually, you will have an individual mindset. Therefore, a bigger collective will come and rule over you. So people have to get their minds together. They have to get their self out of this accusing other people and fix up themselves, then fix up their families, then fix up their friends and community. Then just once that's fixed up, nobody can do anything to you. You'll be your own boss in everything you do. It's not going to be easy, because there's a mindset there that people need to overcome, and it didn't start with you and me. It was there from our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation and our great-grandparents' generation, and it goes right back into the continent of Africa. So this is not going to be easy. These are hard conversations and going to be hard truths that people have to face. But if people are prepared to face them, they can make a start. And when it won't happen overnight. When you make that start from generation to generation to generation, it will become freer and freer and freer, till eventually we can pool our resources as different people come on the earth, pool their resources together, and they'll be just like a one people. Just like you see in China or in the Jewish communities or all the other communities. They're like one people. They'll buy houses together. They don't actually have the same bloodline. They'll just be friends or whatever, and they'll still buy houses together and trust one another, and then collectively come together to buy more houses and more houses. And then before you know it, they control the whole area. The area, they're literally renaming the streets in that area because they control it. When are we able to do that? When will we be able to do something like that? Let's take a think about these things, and let's be a little bit more sensible, and let's be a little bit more humble with one another. Take care. Live for Love TV. See you soon.
People, one step more, one step more, one step more, one step more, until you reach your goals. One step more. This is Live for Love.